When Severus Snape spoke, the professors at the staff tables stiffened. At the student tables, Malfoy and his cronies lost all restraint, echoing Snape's cutting remarks and piling on insults aimed at Neville. Neville went pale, tears pricked at his eyes. The Gryffindors around him bristled. Harry and Ron's gazes practically burned. Hermione gripped her wand so hard she might have drawn blood. Even if it meant losing house points, she could not stop herself from wanting to hex Malfoy. A cold glint flashed in Charles' eyes. He sat with his back to the Slytherin table, fiddling with a silver goblet. Casually, without looking up, he flicked it. The cup sang through the air and streaked across the Great Hall like a small cannonball, hitting Malfoy squarely in the mouth. There was a sick crack. Malfoy, who had been talking nonstop, fell abruptly silent. A scream cut through the hall as everyone turned to see blood on Malfoy's lips. He spat out a tooth, an incisor knocked clean loose. "Who did that?" Malfoy demanded, clutching his mouth, lisping, stunned and furious. Crabbe and Goyle's eyes found Charles in a heartbeat. "It's him!" Before they could move, two more cups screamed from Charles' hand and struck Crabbe and Goyle each on the head. Both big boys collapsed as if hit by a stupefy. Malfoy shrieked, "You assaulted a student in broad daylight. You'll get expelled. I'll tell my father." Charles didn't bother turning. He stared at the table piled with food and said flatly, "There shouldn't be stray dogs in Hogwarts Castle. I hate it when dogs bark while I'm eating. When dogs bark, I throw things. It's a reflex. I can't help it." Malfoy's face went feral. "You're calling me a dog?" Charles' expression didn't change. "Two dogs have already stopped barking. Why is there still one barking over there? Bark if you must. Bark away." Cups whizzed past Malfoy's ears like cannonballs. The wind by his face made him tremble. Finally, his vision blacked out and he fainted from sheer fright. Charles looked at the now cleared place at the Slytherin table and let out a long, satisfied sigh. "That's better. The annoying dogs have stopped barking." A stunned silence rippled through the Great Hall. Then the students who disliked Malfoy erupted in laughter. "Nice one. The stray dogs have been chased away." The older Slytherins, however, were not amused. Charles had not only humiliated Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, he'd disgraced Slytherin as a whole. A senior hissed, "We should stand up for Malfoy." They moved as if to, then froze. Glances were exchanged. Who was this small Hufflepuff who could fling goblets like that? It seemed smarter to leave. With scowls and muttered threats, they dragged Malfoy and the others out of the hall. Snape's face had gone cold. "This is outrageous," he snapped at the staff table. "Someone assaulted a student. Hufflepuff, 10 points deducted," he declared. Professor Sprout's smile only widened. "Professors not intervening in small student squabbles is a Hogwarts tradition," she teased. Charles didn't even look. He thought there were stray dogs barking. If dogs are barking in the Great Hall, throwing a cup seems a reasonable response. "I think it was a brave, practical act," she added. "Hufflepuff, 11 points awarded." McGonagall's normally stern face softened. She nodded. "Agreed. I'll add 11 to Hufflepuff as well." Flitwick, laughing heartily, lifted his cup and chimed in. "And I'll add 11 too." Snape drew a long, annoyed breath and slipped from his seat. Meanwhile, the Hufflepuffs ate and laughed louder than they had in ages. Later, passing the giant hourglasses that tracked the house points, they stopped dead. Hufflepuff hadn't lost points. They had gained 23 points net from the incident, and with 13 bonus points from Charms class earlier, Hufflepuff was actually leading all 4 houses this week. The Hufflepuffs whooped and hugged one another. Charles, who'd done the deed, had clearly been the biggest contributor. "We have to celebrate Charles properly." "Where is he?" Charles was in Professor Sprout's office. The herbology professor met him at the door, practically beaming. "Charles, did you see? Hufflepuff is leading the cup this week. It hasn't happened for so long." Charles blinked. He hadn't realized how much with the house cup mattered to Professor Sprout. Still, thinking of Severus Snape's naked scheming for Slytherin made something stir in him. For years before Harry's time, the cup had belonged to Slytherin. After Harry arrived, it belonged mostly to Gryffindor. Hufflepuff had been a footnote. Charles hadn't planned to involve himself in house politics, but seeing how happy Professor Sprout was, he made a quiet decision. He wanted to help Hufflepuff win the cup, as a gift to her. "You did very well in Charms too, Charles," Professor Sprout said proudly. I heard about that. Charles told her about the events of the Great Hall, then added, Auntie, I think my magic perception has improved. I'd like to try planting something more difficult. Professor Sprout's eyes lit with encouragement. All right, Charles, you're brave and curious, exactly the sort of student who should try. 3 points for Hufflepuff, she announced with a wink. Charles, a little stunned, watched as she reached into a drawer and took out a small packet of seeds. I'd been saving these for you, she said. I meant to give them later, but you're ready now. She held them out. These are guardian tree seeds. The guardian tree is a rare magical plant, resistant to the dark arts. After a wizard touches a grown guardian tree, they gain short-term resistance to many dark arts. It's an important ingredient for some counter-dark potions. It's also a plant that demands careful magical regulation from seed to maturity. Cultivating a guardian tree is a major rite of passage for any herbologist. Professor Sprout's tone grew gentler. Most even manage it only in their 3rd year, but I believe you can do it. When Charles looked at the seeds, something new flickered in his vision, clear, game-like text overlaying the packet. You have obtained guardian tree seeds. Successfully planting this seed will grant a reward, defense against the dark arts, comprehension improvement. If this plant reaches maturity, you will receive a reward. Defense against the dark arts, comprehension improvement, silver level, minor dark arts resistance increase, bronze level. 22. Failed, glow mushroom. Sharp Sprout's eyes widened, his heart beat faster. The rewards for planting a guardian tree were far richer than he'd imagined. Just successfully planting the seed would earn a bronze level reward. If he could cultivate the guardian tree to maturity, there would even be a silver level reward. And if he could stack those rewards to legendary tier, he pictured the difference. The effort he'd poured into gaining his current legendary abilities had taken years, day after day, since he transmigrated. Even the legendary heat resistance enhancement had been earned through endless acres of cotton planted, a string of bronze rewards finally culminating in a legendary effect after he met Professor Sprout. How much sweat and labor had gone into that? Only he knew. By comparison, raising guardian trees to legendary rank would require far fewer specimens. The gap in difficulty was like the difference between a person who got rich by selling street food and someone born into wealth who started a business and became a billionaire. The rewards themselves were astonishing: comprehension of the dark arts and resistance to them. If he could stack those to legendary, Sharp Sprout imagined what that would mean. He'd be a nemesis of the dark arts. Antonin Dolohov. He might as well be Lord Voldemort. After a rare flutter of excitement, he calmed himself. The benefits of planting a guardian tree were massive, but so was the difficulty. Professor Sprout only hoped he could manage it by his 3rd year. Even with the planting system at his disposal, she didn't expect it to be done quickly, but the sooner he started, the more experience he'd gain. He drew a breath. Aunt, I want to try. I'll continue on the path of a herbology master. It's my duty to carry on the Sprout family's legacy. Professor Sprout's face softened. She led him to the greenhouse behind Hogwarts Castle and to an empty plot. Sharp Sprout, she said, this is the experimental plot I've set aside for you. From now on, you can work on your ideas here whenever you like. He looked at the rich, well-tended soil with a surge of emotion. He'd already been told that the Hogwarts greenhouse was Britain's oldest and finest, built on foundations laid by Helga Hufflepuff herself. Every inch of soil held a trace of her magic. Compared to the Sprout family greenhouse, centuries of Hogwarts resources and maintenance made even a small patch of this ground a treasure. Plants grew faster and stronger here. Superior variations were more likely. Herbologists queued for years just for a chance to trial a seed in soil like this, and now a whole plot had been handed to him. Professor Sprout smiled kindly. Child, we are the last bloodline of the Sprout family. You are my dearest relative. All my resources are yours. An empty plot in the greenhouse is nothing. All right, let me teach you how to cultivate a guardian tree. She began her explanation. Sharp Sprout cleared his mind and listened intently. The guardian tree is a magical plant with powerful effects on wizards, she said. From the first moment you sow the seed, you must carefully regulate your magic. Even emotions matter. Once, someone cast a dark art spell the day before and then planted a guardian tree seed. The seed didn't grow into a guardian tree. It became a dark arts plant and cursed the planter to death. These cases are rare, but they show how sensitive this plant is to surrounding magic. Relax, she added. You have time to learn. Her tone made one thing clear. She didn't expect him to succeed right away. Ciel Sprout, with his prior life scientific research experience, had no illusions about being some naturally gifted prodigy. Real progress came through repeated failures. Failure was part of research and of growth. So he showed no disappointment. He took the guardian tree seed from her and tapped it gently with his wand while he filled his mind with happy, calm images, the crude method he could manage given his limited magic perception. He placed the seed in the potion bottle Professor Sprout had prepared, tapped the bottle's neck 3 times with his wand, drew 3 concentric circles clockwise, and chanted, Protego, Arboris. The seed trembled. The clear potion bathing it began to green, but the green shifted in an instant to a dull gray-brown, and the seed lost its sheen. Cher sighed softly. It was a failure at the seed processing stage. Professor Sprout was quick to comfort him. It's all right, Ciel Sprout. Apart from a handful of famed herbology masters recorded in the history of magic, no one has ever cultivated a guardian tree on their first try. Even they are rare. Don't rush, take your time. Ciel smiled. I know, Aunt. I'm ready for the long haul. There are 2 more sets of seeds and reagents, she said. You can try again. He shook his head. He knew his magic perception was too weak. From this failed attempt, it seemed he'd need his magic perception enhancement stacked to at least silver to make consistent progress in seed processing. If his perception was off, extra materials wouldn't help much. Success would be pure luck and impossible to reproduce. Guardian tree seeds and the potions were probably expensive. No sense wasting them. Once his goldfish vine matured, his magic perception should improve significantly. He could try again then. And seed processing was the simplest step of all. Later stages would demand even more sensitivity, perhaps gold level or higher magic perception enhancement. He estimated his earliest real hope of planting a guardian tree might be toward the end of his first year. For now, he would cultivate the goldfish vine and experiment with other magical plants. He told Professor Sprout his plan. She seemed unsurprised and produced several other seeds. These are jumping root seeds, she said. These are bubble stem. The difficulty is a bit higher than goldfish vine, but far easier than a guardian tree. Thanks to Professor Sprout's introductions, Ciel could already see the potential rewards. Jumping root offered slight jumping ability enhancement, bronze level. Bubble stem provided bubblehead charm comprehension, bronze level. He felt a little deflated. Jumping ability enhancement was hardly practical. Even at legendary level, it wouldn't let him outjump a flying broom. Bubblehead charm comprehension was more interesting. It could boost his charms, but bubblehead charm itself was rarely used. If the reward had been for a more practical charm, he would have chosen it in a heartbeat. Scanning the seeds, he still hadn't found anything more useful than bubble stem, so he decided to plant bubble stem first. At least it would help his charms. As he made his decision, his gaze drifted upward to a mushroom clinging to the greenhouse ceiling, emitting a soft glow. Ciel's eyes brightened. Aunt, he asked, what kind of mushroom is that? Professor Sprout blinked. That mushroom? Oh, that's a luminous mushroom. It emits light like lumos, but has little other use. If you add them to a potion, they simply turn into specks of light and drift away. Historically, they were ornamental, sometimes put in lanterns. Later, a herbology master cultivated a mutated variety that glowed brighter and could serve as a light source for greenhouses. She paused, curious. Why do you ask? Ciel's attention had already pulled in the seed's data. He received an information readout about the plant variant. Mutated luminous mushroom. Successfully planting it grants extremely slight night vision enhancement. Once the luminous mushroom matures, the reward will upgrade to slight night vision enhancement, bronze level. Very small amount of lumos comprehension, bronze level. Ciel Sprout's lips twitched. Night vision and even a tiny bit of lumos comprehension wasn't spectacular, but it was something practical, and growing on Hogwarts soil might make the mushroom easier to cultivate. He gave Professor Sprout a quick, thoughtful look and began to plan his next moves. 23. Planting, flying lessons. After seeing the reward information for the luminous mushroom, Charles let out a long breath, feeling a new surge of hope. Improved night vision was a useful ability. Even more important, once the luminous mushrooms matured, they could grant Lumos insights as a reward. For Charles, Lumos was far more valuable than a bubblehead charm. Even if the Lumos insight from cultivating luminous mushrooms was small, he made his decision without hesitation. Auntie, I want to cultivate luminous mushrooms. Professor Sprout looked a little surprised. Luminous mushrooms were a magical plant almost no herbology student chose to grow, useful only for illumination. Still, if Charles wanted to, she would support him. And he was a first year. In her view, keeping an interest alive mattered more than being the best. Interest was the greatest talent. She brought him a generous portion of luminous mushroom mycelium. Their cultivation is simple, she said. The soil here in the Hogwarts greenhouse is perfect. The tricky part is that they need at least 6 hours of Lumos light every day after sunset. If you miss even one day, they can die, so you'll have to be very diligent. That was why nobody liked cultivating them. High effort for little practical return, and the requirement to shine Lumos every night made it worse. Charles, however, showed nothing but pleasure. At this time of year, the sun set around 6 o'clock, so from 6 in the evening to midnight, he'd have to stay in the greenhouse casting Lumos. Too healthy, he thought. Since he'd raised his vitality to legendary level, going to bed before midnight had become routine. Staying up late didn't bother him. He could stay awake for days if needed and recover quickly. The mushroom's demands suited him perfectly. He planted them then, following Professor Sprout's instructions. The glowing mycelium was evenly buried across an experimental plot. Sprout reminded him, a patch this size will need a lot of Lumos, especially now, just after planting. This is when they need light the most. Charles nodded, lifted his wand, and said, Lumos. A gentle light burst from the tip of his wand. Under the Lumos glow, some of the luminous mushroom mycelium activated in the soil. Tiny reward light clusters appeared in front of Charles' eyes. You have successfully planted luminous mushrooms. You can receive a reward, extremely weak night vision improvement. Upon maturity of the luminous mushrooms, the reward will upgrade to weak night vision improvement, bronze. Very small amount of Lumos insight. Charles' face brightened as the reward lights drifted above the plot. Luminous mushrooms didn't grow as fast as Muggle World mushrooms. They needed to absorb Lumos magic, but among magical plants they matured fairly quickly. Professor Sprout said they generally took about 4 weeks, and more Lumos sped that up. Charles glanced at his system panel. Next to entries for the soil loosening spell and the pruning charm, the word Lumos, bronze level, appeared. The bronze level tag beside Lumos was slowly darkening with practice, but his proficiency lagged behind the soil loosening spell and the pruning charm, which he had used almost constantly for 2 months. It took me almost 2 months of practice for the soil loosening spell and the pruning charm to reach bronze level, he thought. If this batch of luminous mushrooms matures, my Lumos should jump much faster, probably straight to bronze. That's far more efficient than practicing alone. And improving Lumos will make cultivating these mushrooms in the goldfish vine even easier. He continued to cast Lumos, one after another, without pause, shining light on the mycelium through the long evening. The first weekend at Hogwarts passed. On Monday morning, the mycelium in his plot was noticeably thicker, and more reward lights hovered above it. Charles smiled. At this rate, they'll mature faster than I expected, he said to himself, then left the greenhouse. Time for class. I'll come back tonight to cast Lumos. Back in the Hufflepuff common room, there was a buzz of excitement. A notice announced that flying class started today. The idea of mounting brooms and leaving the ground had the Hufflepuffs cheering. Some students, especially those from wizarding families, dreamed of being scouted for the Quidditch team. For many Hufflepuffs, Quidditch was one of the few outdoor activities that fired their imaginations. Not everyone was eager. Hannah Abbott, a shy, slightly clumsy girl, twisted her fingers beside Charles and looked pale with worry. What if my broom doesn't listen? She fretted. What if I fall? I already have enough trouble on the ground. It'll be worse up there. Charles listened and couldn't help a small, amused smile. As her friend and as someone who'd helped with her goldfish vine, he offered reassurance. It'll be fine. The professor will be watching the whole time. Stay close to me when you fly. If you fall, I can catch you. And keep your goldfish vine with you. It'll help you stay calm. Hannah brightened as if someone had given her courage. Really? Charles, thank you so much. I already feel better. Charles smiled. He wasn't only trying to calm her. With his legendary vitality and extraordinary resistance to dizziness, he could tolerate high-speed flight and sharp rotations without fainting. He said nothing of that, but he knew he'd be steady in the air, more than enough for helping Hannah. Meanwhile, in the Hogwarts medical wing, Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle slipped out under the pretense of recovery. Malfoy's front teeth had been restored after Charles' earlier attack, but they weren't fully healed. He still lisped, and he wasn't going to face the school like that. His father had arranged an excuse so he could skip class and work on revenge instead. Damn Charles, Malfoy hissed. This time I'll make him pay. Crabbe and Goyle, remembering how easily Charles had beaten them, trembled. We can't beat Charles, they stammered. He's too strong. Malfoy sneered. We're not talking about brute force. We're wizards. Magic matters. He produced a shimmering silver metal rod from his cloak. My father got this from an alchemist. It emits a light that can knock someone out for a short time. When Charles rides his broom near the tower, I'll use it to knock him out. Then he'll fall and break his bones. Crabbe and Goyle gulped at the plan, while Malfoy's face curved into a cruel, confident smile. 24. Flying talent. Is this thing broken? All Monday morning, the Hufflepuffs were listless in their lessons, as if their minds were already up on their broomsticks. Fortunately, the first class was herbology. Professor Sprout understood. She didn't penalize the few who were clearly daydreaming, and she even let them out a few minutes early so they could eat and get ready. As Shire was leaving, Professor Sprout called after him, her eyes bright and a little wistful. Shire, I'm sorry I have class this afternoon and can't watch you take to a broom for the first time. You'll do it, I'm sure of it, Shire said. I've already arranged a Nimbus 2000 for you, she added. You'll be the one to represent Hufflepuff someday. Shire smiled wryly. He hadn't even had flying yet, and Aunt Sprout was promising him a Nimbus 2000? It was the top broom of the day, not quite a firebolt yet, but close enough, a Wizarding World equivalent of a sports car. That she'd bought one for him was astonishingly generous. Looking into her hopeful face, he felt something stir inside him. Hufflepuff hadn't had Quidditch glory for years. Perhaps Professor Sprout truly hoped he could help change that. Maybe he should try. Auntie, he replied, I'll do my best. Professor Sprout watched him go, expectation and a private sorrow in her face. Shire's father, her younger brother, had once been a Hufflepuff beater and his mother a chaser. If Shire joined the team, if his parents were alive to see it, how joyful it would have been. The thought made her eyes blur, and for a moment she blinked back tears. Then she clenched her hands. I will see Shire become someone proud, she whispered. And that Anton Dolohov, if I can't deliver justice myself, I will sleep easier hearing that he's rotting in Azkaban under the Dementors. At 3:30, the Hufflepuffs hurried out to the grounds in front of the castle. It was a clear, breezy afternoon. The grass rippled in the wind, and everything felt sharp and fresh. The Ravenclaws were already there, and 20 broomsticks lay neatly on the grass. The Eagles, like the Hufflepuffs, were nervous. Flying was a first for most of them. No amount of cleverness could banish the fear of leaving the ground, so they clutched their tipsy manuals, 100 Quidditch flying tips, how to tame your broomstick, hoping it would help. Professor Rolanda Hooch arrived and wasted no time. All right, she barked. What are you waiting for? Stand next to a broom. She gave the usual instructions. Everyone extended their right hands and placed them on the handles. Up, only a few brooms obliged. Shire's rose gently beneath his hand. Most either stayed put or rolled lazily on the grass. Hannah Abbott's broom, however, gave her hand a sharp slap, like the wag of a stern ruler, as if scolding her for shouting. Hooch frowned at the uneven response and warned, Don't let your broom see your fear. Brooms are like horses. They know who's weak. Gather your courage. Shire raised an eyebrow at his own broom's obedience. He'd had a thought. If the broom didn't respond, he'd kick it, and the broom seemed to shiver with appeasement the instant the notion crossed his mind, every twig coaxing him toward calm. Hooch went down the line, making sure each student had a grip, then blew her whistle. 3, 1, take off! In the next beat, 20 broomsticks defied gravity and lifted. Shire felt the world fall away beneath him. A grin spread across his face. Riding a broom was unlike being sealed inside an airplane. You felt the wind, it cut past you, alive and loud. He'd never experienced anything like it in his former life, and it thrilled him. The flying itself was easy. This body's magic might not be exceptional, but its aptitude for broom work and its extraordinary physical coordination, plus an uncanny resistance to dizziness, made him control the broom as naturally as breathing. Hooch watched him with interest. Didn't he grow up in the Muggle world? She thought. He shouldn't have had any practice. How could he be this smooth on his first ride? She muttered under her breath, impressed. This one might have Quidditch potential. Shire climbed higher, drifting toward the tall castle tower. Hidden at the summit were Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, watching. Seeing Shire handle the broom like a swimmer through water, Malfoy's face twisted with disbelief. How is he doing that? He hissed. He's flying so well. Jealousy hardened his expression. Not for long, he said. I'll make him fall in front of everyone. Malfoy drew a silver metal rod, one of those mirrored things his father admired, and flashed it. A brilliant glare shot from the tower, like a sliver of sun reflected straight into Shire's eyes. Shire frowned. It's not that bright out today, he thought, but the glare only distracted him for a second before he pushed it aside. Doesn't matter, he told himself. Let it reflect. It won't affect me. On the tower, Malfoy waved the rod until his arm ached, but Shire did not falter. He stared in disbelief. It's supposed to stun anybody who looks at it, he protested. Crabbe and Goyle muttered, maybe it's broken. Malfoy's hand tightened on the rod. Then we'll try it on someone else, he said. Hannah Abbott was drifting past the tower now, wobbling. Malfoy smiled thinly. If memory served, this clumsy girl was close with Shire. She'd make a good test subject. He angled the rod, and a flash struck Hannah's face. Unlike Shire, Hannah didn't have a warded resistance to being dazed. Her eyes glazed over instantly. She lost her grip. The broom spun out from under her, and she plunged toward the ground like a kite with a broken string. 25. Rescue. Rage. When Hannah Abbott fell, the Hufflepuffs and the Eagles who had noticed gasped in unison. No one knew what had happened. Only Ciel, who had been closest to her, saw the flash that had flickered a moment before. He looked toward it and saw Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle hastily leaving the area. A cold light sparked in Ciel's eyes. That flash, could it have been Malfoy's doing? It looked like the kind of light that could make people faint. But Ciel had a legendary level resistance to dizziness. It was nearly impossible for him to be knocked out that way. Anything Malfoy could buy from alchemical suppliers wouldn't be enough to break through his resistance. Yet Hannah had collapsed as if struck by the light. Anger churned hot in Ciel's chest. Malfoy really was exactly as expected, a complete bastard. But there was no time for confrontation now. He turned his broom with a sharp arc and chased after Hannah, who was already in free fall. The flying class fell silent with shock. The more timid students covered their eyes, fearing the worst. Madame Hooch's face drained of color as she rode her broom and rushed toward them. The fall had been so sudden there'd been no warning at all. Even with Hooch's quick reaction, it seemed like she might be too late. Her stomach dropped. If nothing changed, the best she could manage might be a barrier on the ground to soften the landing. But falling from that height would still break bones. A head-first impact could even be fatal. Just as Hooch's hope waned, an arc streaked across the sky, quick and precise like lightning. A figure on a broom sliced through the air with the agility of a swordfish. Is that Ciel? He's flying so fast. He's catching up. Come on, Ciel. Everyone watched, breath held, but despair was already appearing in their faces. Hannah was dropping closer to the ground, and although Ciel was closing the distance, it still seemed too late. Hooch flicked her wand and conjured an invisible barrier on the ground, hoping to lessen Hannah's injuries. Then Ciel did something astonishing. He placed one foot on his broom with all his weight, the force making the broom bend like a bow. Pushing off, he launched himself forward like a cannonball. Just as Hannah was about to crash into the barrier, Ciel shot out and used his own body to cushion her. There was a dull, muffled thud as both of them hit the ground. Silence fell so heavy it hurt. Hooch's face went ashen. She was already moving to take them to the hospital wing. Ciel had taken most of the impact against the barrier. How many bones had he broken? But then, to everyone's amazement, Ciel flipped up from the ground in a smooth somersault and rose to his feet. He exhaled in relief. That was close. If he hadn't acted so fast and something had happened to Hannah, it would have affected his goldfish vine cultivation. For someone with his legendary vitality, the injuries from that fall were practically negligible. Hannah, who had been unconscious, opened her eyes dazedly. "What happened to me?" she whispered. Only then did the gathered students release the breath they had been holding. Hooch's legs buckled slightly from the adrenaline. She grabbed Hannah's hand, equal parts angry and relieved. "Hannah Abbott, didn't you eat? Do you have anemia? You must tell me your physical condition before flying." She scolded and fussed. Then, after a moment of appraisal, her tone shifted to admiration. "Beautiful flying skills," she said, turning to Ciel, "and the courage to risk yourself to save someone. Ciel, 15 points to Hufflepuff." Ciel took a deep breath. Hannah's eyes were wet with tears. Hooch was still fuming. He told them what he had seen. "I saw Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle leaving the tower earlier. I saw a flash. I think that light can make people faint. They were trying to make someone fall off their broom. Hannah just got caught in the crossfire." Hooch's expression hardened until her face went white. "If that's true," she said quietly, "they've gone too far. They'll be held accountable for this." She gathered Ciel and the indignant Hufflepuffs and hurried back to the castle. "No," Snape said at once, his voice sharp and cold. "Malfoy and the others are injured and still in the hospital wing. They couldn't have done such a thing. Besides, our Slytherins know their limits. They wouldn't do this." He glanced at Ciel and Hannah with a sneer. "Maybe it was just a reflection of the sun. Some people always like to blame others for their own mistakes." The office door slammed open. Professor Sprout, having heard what happened in flying class, burst in, furious. She hugged Ciel as if to check for injuries, then put a protective arm around Hannah. "Our Hufflepuffs don't lie," she snapped. "Severus, Malfoy, and the others went too far. This must be dealt with." Snape snorted. "Hufflepuffs don't lie? Professor Sprout, young people are the best at lying. We all know that. To accuse someone, you need evidence. Do you intend to expel the child of a prominent governor on your nephew's mere word? The Board of Governors will never agree." Professor Sprout's outrage flared. The Hufflepuffs with her had never seen their head of house so angry. She was like a mother hen facing a snake. The argument grew heated, and even after Dumbledore arrived, they reached no real resolution. Dumbledore, troubled, admitted that Snape was technically right. Without solid evidence, they couldn't formally accuse Malfoy. And as long as no one had been seriously hurt, the board would be unlikely to authorize a strict investigation. In the end, Dumbledore could only make a symbolic remark. "This matter requires further investigation." Sprout returned to the Hufflepuff common room, red-faced and still furious. The Hufflepuffs were burning with the same anger. Hufflepuff's unity was legendary. When one Hufflepuff was in trouble, the rest rallied. "Ciel, we believe you. That Malfoy will not get away with this." Ciel took a steadying breath. Snape's mocking look replayed in his mind. He realized that Snape, brusque and hot and cold in his affections, was simply being unreasonable in his favoritism. A slow smile touched Ciel's lips. If Snape and Malfoy were going to be unfair, then he could play by their rules too. He approached Professor Sprout. "Aunt, I have a way to teach Malfoy a lesson," he said, "and make Professor Severus unable to open his mouth about it." Professor Sprout heard what Ciel had suggested, and the anger in her eyes immediately softened into excitement. "Ciel, you have an idea?" Ciel nodded. He remembered something from the original story. The Thursday flying lesson, when Neville lost control of his broom, crashed, and badly hurt himself. Malfoy had been gleefully poking at the remembrall. Neville had dropped until Harry chased him down and snatched it back in midair. That display had gotten Harry onto the Quidditch team in his first year. But Ciel wasn't focused on Harry. He was thinking about how Malfoy had failed to get what he wanted and would probably be punished by Snape. Given Malfoy's temper, he wouldn't let it go. On Thursday, he would likely target Neville again. Neville was close to Ciel and try to provoke trouble. The Remembrall would probably show up again. Ciel narrowed his eyes and asked Professor Sprout, "Aunt, is there any magical plant that can be hidden inside a Remembrall?" Professor Sprout paused, thinking. "You mean a plant that can disguise itself as a Remembrall? Let me see." She thought for a moment, then brightened. "There is a plant called mirror grass. It can imitate anything it has touched. It's extremely rare and is often mixed with other plants. Unless you're an experienced herbologist, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference." Professor Sprout now understood where Ciel was going. "You want to make a fake Remembrall using mirror grass and have Malfoy take it. Then teach him a lesson." Sprout beamed. "That would certainly leave Severus speechless. Malfoy would be the one to snatch it. However, mirror grass only disguises itself to look like a Remembrall," she added. "We still need to hide something inside to make Malfoy pay." She was clearly enjoying the thought. "What about a pot of biting cabbage? If Malfoy grabs it, the cabbage will wake up and bite his hand." Ciel's mouth fell open. Biting cabbage? No wonder people warned not to rile an honest person. Sprout was taking it seriously. But biting cabbage was a dangerous plant on the Ministry's restricted list. Ciel shook his head. "Biting cabbage is too blatant. Let's use something not forbidden, but that will still make Malfoy suffer." Professor Sprout snorted. She was a little annoyed she couldn't inflict something harsher on Malfoy. Then her face brightened again. "Got it. I have something that won't cause real harm, but it'll send the message that Hufflepuff isn't to be trifled with." Meanwhile, in Snape's office, Severus had been scolding Malfoy in no uncertain terms. "You idiot," he snapped. "If you're going to play dirty, don't do it where anyone can see. Do you realize what would have happened if Hannah Abbott had fallen to her death? Even your father couldn't have saved you then. You'd be expelled from Hogwarts." Malfoy went pale and dared not speak. After a long, cold moment, Snape said, "This time, I'll let it go. Don't let it happen again." When Snape left, Malfoy finally exhaled, but the look in his eyes hardened. "Ciel Sprout," he muttered through gritted teeth. "This is your fault. Who told you to keep opposing me and get me lectured by Snape? I'm not finished with you." He thought of Ciel's terrifying strength and the rumor that Ciel could fall from a broom and be unhurt. He had no intention of confronting Ciel directly yet. Then Malfoy considered Thursday's flying lesson. Neville was Ciel's cousin and very close to him. If Malfoy picked on Neville, that would also bother Ciel, and Neville looked like easy prey. A cruel smile spread across Malfoy's face. He couldn't wait for Thursday. At the same time, Ciel explained the plan to Neville. "We're going to need you to cooperate," he said. "All of Hufflepuff will be helping for the next few days." Neville looked jittery, as if he'd been entrusted with something enormous. Ciel patted his shoulder. "Believe in yourself, Neville. I always thought you had great potential." Neville flushed with excitement. No one had ever praised him like that, not family, not classmates. Being trusted by Ciel made him feel responsible and proud. He squared his shoulders. "Cousin Ciel, I'll do my best." After Neville left, Ciel went to the hospital wing. Hannah was resting there. Although Ciel had cushioned her fall and reduced the force she took, Hannah's constitution wasn't as strong as his, so Professor Sprout had insisted she stay and be observed for 2 days. When Ciel entered, Hannah was sitting up, tending goldfish vines in pots. The little plants had already turned a rich orange-red, almost fully matured. Ciel felt a flush of satisfaction. Hannah had done an excellent job. She was a fine goldfish vine caretaker, the second one to do it, in fact, only slightly slower than Neville. She'd soon be able to harvest another reward. Hannah hurried to thank him again. When she first woke up, she'd been groggy and didn't know what had happened. Later, she learned that Ciel had saved her without hesitation. "Ciel," she said, grateful. "I don't know how to thank you." Ciel smiled mysteriously. "We're all Hufflepuff. We help each other. And you've grown these goldfish vines so well. That's thanks enough." He hesitated a moment, then asked, "By the way, Hannah, you still have 2 days before you can come to class, right?" Hannah's smile flickered into a pained expression. Yes, it's awful. Shiar made a sympathetic face. Not being in class must be terrible. Hannah winced. Ciel handed her a stack of notes. I brought today's notes. You can study them from bed so you don't fall behind. Hannah hesitated, then couldn't resist. She opened the notes and started to read aloud in a small voice. Basic principles of charms, basic principles of transfiguration, common classifications in herbology, until she clamped a hand to her temples. My head, it hurts. Rest then, Shiar said, glancing at the goldfish vines, now almost completely orange-red. I'll leave you to it. Hannah relaxed with a grateful sigh as Shiar left the hospital wing. As he walked away, 3 small clusters of reward light converged in his line of sight and flowed into him. Your planted goldfish vine has matured. You have received the reward, slight increase in magic perception. 27. Transformation, silver level spell. 3 consecutive notifications flashed on the system panel. Charles felt a stronger surge than he had with the last harvest reward, as if he could hear magic flowing through his veins, whispering, waiting for him to call it. The feeling faded almost as quickly as it came, but when he looked back at the system panel, he noticed subtle changes. The magic perception enhancement reward was still listed as bronze level, but a faint silver gleam now shimmered inside its bronze aura, as though it were very close to advancing. Charles brightened. That explained why this reward had felt much stronger than before. Then his eyes froze. In the ability column, the soil loosening spell and the pruning charm, both originally bronze, had changed. The pruning charm's bronze label now held a flicker of silver, showing it was nearly silver level. The soil loosening spell, however, had fully shed its bronze glow. It was bathed in silver light. Soil loosening spell. Charles inhaled sharply, doubting his eyes for a moment. For almost 2 months he had practiced those 2 charms tirelessly, yet their level had not budged. He hadn't used them much recently. How could such a leap happen now? Then it clicked. The breakthrough in both charms came right after his magic perception improved again. In other words, his weak perception had been the bottleneck. No matter how many times he practiced, his charms couldn't rise beyond the limit his perception allowed. Now that his magic perception had inched forward, it had unlocked the level ceiling and the charms could advance. He smiled at the silver soil loosening spell. The system's ratings weren't arbitrary. An upgrade meant a qualitative change. He was eager to test it. At the Hogwarts greenhouse, standing before his experimental plot, Charles waved his ash wand. He pointed the tip downward and drew a spiral from the center out, finishing with a quick wrist flick. Terra, Laxus! A richer, brownish-yellow light burst from the wand tip and sank into the soil. The feeling was immediately different. The magic felt livelier, more active than his previous casts. He watched the earth respond. The affected soil loosened faster and broader, and the depth of the loosened layer had increased. The range has expanded a lot, he said to himself. The loosened layer is deeper, too. This alone will improve planting efficiency. He scooped up a pinch of the treated soil to compare. It seemed to radiate a subtle vitality that the untreated soil lacked. Picking up a handful of the untouched earth confirmed it. The silver soil loosening spell stimulates more life in the soil, he realized. That should raise the chance of seeds surviving and germinating. Even a small increase could be the difference when cultivating difficult magical plants. He hadn't expected that a level increase would change more than just range and depth. It reinforced what Professor Sprout's lessons implied. Planting charms were crucial for successful cultivation. To make real progress in herbology, he mused, I should raise the soil loosening spell, the pruning charm, and other planting charms to legendary levels. Lumos, too. If I can master those, cultivating magical plants will be so much easier. Guardian tree? I could plant a whole forest. The image thrilled him, but he tempered his excitement. A long journey begins with small steps, and for now his charms were only bronze or silver. He should focus on the task at hand, the luminous mushrooms. He set to work again. One silver soil loosening spell after another, he treated the soil. Each cast might only add a little vitality, but cumulatively the mycelium in his experimental plot grew noticeably more active. He was pleased. Then he raised his wand and whispered, Lumos. The beam of light shone across the field. Charles felt a small jolt of surprise. He'd noticed Lumos had improved the last time his magic perception was upgraded, but now it seemed even stronger. Is this connected to the soil loosening spell's improvement? He wondered, thinking it through. Commonly used charms often shared affinities. Proficiency in one area could bolster another. Transfiguration, for example, spanned multiple branches of magic, and masters in that field tended to be broadly skilled, which was part of why transfiguration experts often rose to leadership at Hogwarts. Dumbledore had been professor of transfiguration before becoming headmaster. Professor McGonagall, a transfiguration master, was likewise a strong candidate for headship. The same principle applied to planting charms. If he could push the soil loosening spell and the pruning charm higher, Lumos and other related spells would likely benefit as well. That thought sharpened his focus. If both the soil loosening spell and Lumos had improved, the luminous mushrooms should mature far faster than he'd originally estimated. He pictured the rewards he would reap and felt his enthusiasm swell. 3 days passed in a blur of soil, light, and steady spellcasting. 28. Neville's Growth, Badger House's Revenge. 3 days later, Char inspected the luminous mushroom mycelium in the greenhouse. It was visibly thicker than before, and the little reward light orbs above it had grown noticeably larger. A satisfied smile crossed his face. As expected, ever since the soil loosening spell advanced to bronze, the mycelium's growth rate had taken a real step up. His eyes drifted to the system panel. The Lumos indicator, which had been hovering below bronze, now showed a deeper, richer bronze sheen. A faint bronze glow was beginning to bloom. Char's expression lit up. The improvement in his magic perception and the advancement of the soil loosening spell had accelerated the Lumos far faster than before. In just 3 days, it was almost ready to reach bronze. Once it did, the luminous mushrooms would probably mature even faster. The thought tempted him to stay in the greenhouse, but Char checked the time and left. Today was Thursday, the day of the first flying class between Gryffindor and Slytherin in the original timeline. The Hufflepuff's anger had been building for 3 days. Today, Malfoy would pay a painful price. Hufflepuffs were not to be trifled with. Back in the Hufflepuff common room, Professor Sprout was there with Neville. When Char returned, Sprout's face brightened. Char, how did you know Neville's grandmother, Mrs. Longbottom, would send him a remembrall today? Sprout asked. Neville looked at Char with surprise. Earlier, Char had told him to cooperate and had predicted that his grandmother might send a remembrall. Sure enough, Neville had found a package that morning, and inside it was a remembrall. Char smiled. Of course, Mrs. Longbottom loves Neville. Sprout's eyes immediately grew wet. Neville, who had always felt both love and fear for his strict grandmother, even his boggart had once taken her form, was taken aback. Char continued, She knows Neville misplaces things often. It's only natural she'd send a remembrall to remind him. And how did I know? Char turned toward Professor Sprout. Because my aunt loves me very much too. At those words, Professor Sprout's tears spilled over. Neville was stunned. Despite her strictness, his grandmother had kept him in her heart. She hadn't been able to be with him, but she had sent a remembrall in the second week of term. A fierce mix of gratitude and shame rose in Neville. He wiped his eyes. Cousin Char, thank you, he said earnestly, and vowed inwardly not to be so careless anymore. He had to grow up and not let down those who believed in him, his grandmother and Cousin Char. I won't let you down, Neville promised. Char patted his shoulder. I believe in you, Neville. Around them, the Hufflepuffs cheered. Neville, we believe in you too. Let's teach that bastard Malfoy a lesson he won't forget. Neville nodded, clenched his fists, and left the common room. Up in the Gryffindor common room, Harry and the others were grumbling about flying class with the Slytherins. What bad luck, Ron muttered. Harry felt nervous about having to show himself up in front of Malfoy. Neville returned to Gryffindor looking unusually tense, like someone on a grave mission. Neville? Harry asked. You've been out early and back late every day this week. What have you been doing? Neville's mind flashed back over the last few days. To carry out Char's plan and make Malfoy suffer, he had spent every spare moment practicing flying with members of the Hufflepuff Quidditch team. The first time he mounted a broom, he had almost fainted. Seeing the ground fall away beneath him had been terrifying. But he'd remembered Char's trust and pushed himself. He still wasn't great, but he could now control a broom well enough to complete the task Char had given him. "Nothing much," he said aloud, forcing a casual tone. "Professor Sprout called me in for extra herbology help." Harry and the others accepted that. After all, it wouldn't be surprising if Neville had odd problems. At 3:30, flying class began. After Monday's incidents, Madame Hooch seemed frazzled. She checked every tower nook and repeated the safety rules more than once. Even so, before she could start her countdown, Neville's broom bolted skyward with him shrieking, "Ah! I can't control my broom. It seems to have a mind of its own." The broom shot off, carrying Neville farther and farther away. Panic rippled through the class. "Is Neville heading toward the Forbidden Forest?" someone cried. The Slytherins laughed, harsh and sharp. Draco Malfoy was in particularly fine form. "Letting Neville Longbottom take flying class is a terrible idea," he jeered. "He's hopeless on the ground. Can you imagine him in the air? If he falls, he might make his brain worse than a troll's." Madame Hooch's face went pale. "Shut up, Draco Malfoy," she snapped. 3 points from Slytherin. She hurried to mount her broom. "Don't fly yourselves until I get back." But no sooner had she left than Malfoy spotted a glowing Remembrall dangling from a branch. His eyes narrowed, a cruel smile spread over his face. He guided his broom toward the tree, grabbed the Remembrall, and waved it like a trophy. "Look what I've got. Neville Longbottom's Remembrall." Harry took off after him in a chase, flying brilliantly and slowly closing the gap. Malfoy grew frantic. Suddenly, Neville reappeared, turning back from the direction of the Forbidden Forest and shouting, "Harry, stay away from that Remembrall." Harry hesitated. Malfoy seized the moment and pulled away, taunting, "Harry Potter can't catch me." Then Malfoy noticed a ring of Hufflepuffs gathered on the tower, watching him with mocking, triumphant faces. For a split second, he understood something was wrong. Too late, the Remembrall in his hand exploded. A foul, thick liquid burst out, smelling worse than troll dung, and rained down over Malfoy's head. An unknown, foul-smelling liquid burst from the Remembrall and drenched Draco Malfoy. The stench hit everyone on the flying class grounds like a wall, like a dozen public restrooms that hadn't been cleaned in weeks in the height of summer. The smell was so overwhelming, Draco rolled his eyes and toppled off his broom, flipping head over heels. Nobody was eager to help him. Even Crabbe and Goyle clamped their hands over their noses and edged away. Only Madame Hooch, because it was her duty, pressed her mouth and nose and muttered a quiet spell, slowing Draco's fall just enough that he didn't plummet from a lethal height. He fractured a leg. That was the luck he got. Still, the worst of it was the smell. He wished, briefly and fervently, that he didn't exist. From the tower above, Professor Pomona Sprout watched the chaos with the Hufflepuffs clustered around her, 2 test tubes in her hands. One held a thick, yellow liquid, the other a pale purple sap. She explained to her students in a calm, teacherly voice. "The yellow is sap from the giant devil's snare," she said. "It smells worse than a troll. Once it gets on you, the stench can last a week. There are no ordinary deodorizing potions or charms that can remove it, except for the wisteria sap in my right hand." She uncorked the pale tube and sprayed a little over the Hufflepuffs. Instantly, they could breathe again. Relief spread across their faces. Sprout smiled, tucking the test tube away. Most of the wisteria sap was still in it. "Wisteria sap is extremely rare," she told them. "Only a tiny amount grows in our Hufflepuff greenhouse. Unfortunately, we've already used it all. Not a single drop remains." Neville, who had been staring at the broken Remembrall, gasped inwardly. His aunt would be furious. Draco had tried to hurt him, and while the attempt had failed, Hannah Abbott had still been caught up in the mess. The remark tugged at Professor Sprout's sympathies. The Hufflepuffs, slow to start but not foolish, put 2 and 2 together and smiled knowingly. "Of course it was used up," one said, and a ripple of laughter went through the group. Their interest in herbology spiked. Without powerful magic, a clever use of plants could still be devastating. A few of them asked if there were other dangerous specimens. Sprout's eyes lit up. "Devil's Snare, Biting Cabbage," she listed. "Very dangerous, very powerful. If any of you want to learn more, I can give private lessons after class. But the show isn't over yet." Her expression turned serious. "Aside from the smell, the Devil's Snare sap has another effect. If it touches the skin directly, it causes boils and scabs. You can't treat those with ordinary mange potion. At that moment, Draco's cries turned from mortified to agonized. Red welts and scabby blisters were spreading across the places where the sap had hit him. He writhed on the ground, each breath a hiss. The commotion and the stench drew Severus Snape like a shadow. He hurried over and, seeing Draco's condition, went pale and furious all at once. "Giant devil's snare sap?" he snapped. "Malfoy, how on earth did you get mixed up with that stuff?" Draco could only scream. Tongue blistered, body stinging, he couldn't answer. Snape rounded on the nearby Slytherins and, seeing Neville standing by with the snapped remembrall, stared at him with venom. "You set a trap for a fellow student," he accused. 20 points from Gryffindor." Gryffindor erupted. "Why?" "Malfoy stole Neville's remembrall," someone shouted. "No one made him steal it. If this happened, it's on Malfoy." Before Snape could cut them off, 2 other professors arrived, Sprout and Professor McGonagall. McGonagall's face was thunderous. "Severus," she said, "I've heard about this. So Malfoy tried to snatch Neville's remembrall and you're docking Gryffindor points? That won't do." She looked at the boys, then to Snape. 20 points to Gryffindor and 20 from Slytherin for Malfoy's actions. Snape's jaw tightened. "Minerva, don't pretend you can't see this was a setup to get Malfoy back," he said, glaring at Sprout. "Mirror grass and giant devil's snare sap. How would Neville Longbottom have access to such things?" Pomona Sprout folded her hands pleasantly. "Evidence, Severus. As you keep reminding us, we can't convict the son of a school governor on suspicion alone, nor should we assume the worst of Neville Longbottom." McGonagall's eyes flashed. "Severus, that's hardly fair." She turned back to the students. 10 more points to Gryffindor for the way Neville has been treated." Snape drew breath, face ashen. 2 heads of houses had just turned his punishment back on Slytherin and rewarded Gryffindor instead. He had no grounds to argue further. Reluctantly, he accepted the deductions. Sprout, who had been watching Draco with concern, added, "The wisteria sap and the June snowgrass that treat the scabs are both greenhouse supplies. We'll need them to heal him." She looked genuinely sympathetic. "But I'm afraid both the wisteria sap and the June snowgrass have already been used up." Her hands spread helplessly. "So I can't help you this time." 30. Poor Malfoy, Shire's position. Professor Sprout's words hung in the air. Professor McGonagall, who had been stern a moment before, let out 2 surprised coughs and then choked back a smile. She gave Professor Sprout a silent mental thumbs up. Well done. Professor Snape, however, looked livid. He waved his wand. Malfoy floated up, and an invisible barrier seemed to cling to his body, trapping most of the stench. A little of the foul smell still leaked out, but everyone could finally breathe easier. Snape shoved a potion down Malfoy's throat, scowling, and marched him away from the crowd. As they left, Malfoy wailed, "Professor, they set me up. They're so underhanded. They had it in for me." Snape's anger only intensified. "You idiot," he snapped. "Of all people to provoke, you picked the Hufflepuffs? Do you really think that lot are easy to bully? You caused trouble before, and now, only days later, you fall for another trap. How can Slytherin have a student as stupid as you? I wish the Sorting Hat would put you somewhere else." Malfoy's face went white. He scrambled for forgiveness. "Professor, I know I was wrong. Please, help me." Snape's brow creased, but he didn't continue the tirade. He had to consider Lucius Malfoy, old favors, and the yearly contribution Lucius made to Slytherin, so he had to deal with this. "Without wisteria sap, that smell won't come off," he said coldly. "Fortunately, it'll fade in a week. Stay away from classes, find an empty room, and stay there. Those scabs, though, they're worse." He sighed inwardly. The scabs from the Devil's Snare weren't something an ordinary mange potion could cure. As a potions master, brewing an effective remedy wasn't hard for him, except that every such potion needed an obscure herb, June snowgrass. It was only grown in small quantities in the Hogwarts greenhouses. Sprout wouldn't part with any. Snape had few options. After a moment, he said bluntly, "We'll have to do it the crude way. Go to the hospital wing and have Madame Pomfrey lance each scab and squeeze the pus out." He added, "It'll be excruciating, but you'll heal quickly." Malfoy drew a shocked breath. Relief flared up. A little pain could be borne, better than being covered in scabs and boiling sores. "Professor, please, send me at once. I can't stand this." Snape shot him a pitying look, then sent him to the hospital wing. turning Malfoy over to Madame Pomfrey. The matron's glare could have killed. She watched Snape until he retreated. He poured another potion down Malfoy's throat. "For the pain," he muttered and left. Malfoy stared after him, dread crawling up his spine. Didn't the professor say it would only be a little pain? Then why the painkiller? Madame Pomfrey tied him to a bed, pinched her nose, and stuffed a towel into his mouth. She flicked her wand. A red, swollen scab was cut open. With another motion, she squeezed out the rank, fetid pus. Malfoy lurched under a pain like his flesh being torn away, and everything went dark at the edges. This was just a little pain? Pomfrey examined the rest of the scabs, sighed, and brought out a small bucket. "Hold on," she told him, "and use that pain potion sparingly. I reckon there are about 100 of these. That bottle might not last you." Malfoy froze. 100? 100 of these agonies? Only one thought remained in his mind. Why did I provoke the Hufflepuffs? Why did I pick a fight with Shire? His scream of pain echoed down the hospital wing. While Malfoy suffered, the Hufflepuff common room rang with laughter and chatter. The house had finally let go of the anger from the last few days. Everyone was talking about the morning's events, mocking Malfoy's boils and Snape's helplessness. In less than 2 weeks of school, the first-year Hufflepuffs, still getting to know one another, had already come together as a unit. Professor Sprout bustled in, bringing more news that made the whole room fall silent. After flying today, Professor McGonagall made an exception. Harry Potter has been chosen as Gryffindor's Seeker. "He's the youngest team member in a century," she said. A ripple of excitement passed through the room. Quidditch was always irresistible. Add Harry Potter and the gossip doubled. But Hannah Abbott leaned forward, whispering, "Why Harry? I don't mean he can't fly. He's excellent. But Shire flies just as well. If Harry can join, why not Shire? It's unfair." Susan Bones and the others agreed. They remembered Shire rescuing Hannah during the earlier flying lesson. In their eyes, he'd been every bit as talented as Potter. Sprout's smile widened. "Harry's record didn't last long," she announced. "I have news. Shire will also be joining the Hufflepuff Quidditch team. He is, in fact, the youngest team member of this century." For a stunned moment, Shire didn't speak. He hadn't objected to joining. He wanted to help Hufflepuff win the cup and make Professor Sprout proud. Yet hearing it declared in public felt awkward. Didn't it attract unwanted attention? But the Hufflepuffs cheered anyway, and Hannah's face flushed with joy as she punched the air. "Fair!" the others cried. "Right choice." Sprout looked at Shire fondly, as if saying, "See, we've got your back. Hufflepuff might not be the flashiest house, but when it came to loyalty, few could beat them." Shire felt a warm rush in his chest. Quidditch, if he could, he had to win it, for Sprout and for these kind, cheering faces. As the applause ebbed, Professor Sprout turned to him. "Shire, what position would you like to play?" 31. Beater, luminous mushrooms. "What position do you want to play after you join the Quidditch team?" Shire asked, watching the others thoughtfully. In the original story, there was no question that the most celebrated role in Quidditch was the Seeker. Harry Potter had shone as Seeker. Catching the golden snitch ends the match, after all. Shire remembered the world record mentioned in the books, a World Cup match that had dragged on for over 3 months until someone finally caught the snitch. But being Seeker wouldn't make the best use of Shire's size and strength, and Hufflepuff already had an exceptional Seeker, Cedric Diggory. For Shire, the position he felt suited him best was one that could use his stamina and power to control the flow of the game. "A beater," he said after a moment. It wasn't as glamorous as Seeker, but beaters controlled the rhythm of play, protecting teammates from bludgers and using them to unsettle opponents. Sprout's face changed when she heard him. A faraway look came into her eyes, nostalgia and more. "A beater," she murmured. "Your father was a beater." She reminded him that her brother, Shire's father, had been a beater too. They'd been Quidditch teammates and had fallen in love at school. Sprout said she used to watch their matches from a windowsill in the corridor. Whenever Hufflepuff scored, his father would wave up at her. She clenched her hands at the memory. "It feels like yesterday," she whispered, and then her voice broke. But everything was ruined by that beast Dolohov. Her hands were tight enough that cuts appeared, red seeping from her palms. Shire looked at her, grave. "Azkaban couldn't kill Dolohov," Sprout said, voice low and fierce. but I swear he will pay. I will not let another sprout child meet that monster." She gripped Shire's hand hard, eyes full of fear. "Promise me, Shire, never go looking for Dolohov. If you ever meet him, run. Run and wait for me to finish that villain myself." Feeling the force of her grip, Shire was silent for a moment and then nodded. He knew how hopeless it would sound to declare he would hunt Dolohov down. Anton Dolohov was a fearsome name that had defeated countless Aurors. Words were worthless. Only action mattered. He left Sprout still shaken and returned to the greenhouse. Facing the familiar beds and the reward orbs bubbling on the display helped steady him, and he buried himself in the work that others might find dull and mechanical. Lumos. The light of the charm danced down the rows, and the delicate mycelia of the luminous mushrooms pulsed in response, tiny lights twinkling like a colony of fireflies. The reward clusters above them grew, faint but steadily, minute after minute. Shire glanced at his palm and saw the faint smear of blood. It came from Sprout's hand. In her excitement, she'd gripped him so tightly the blood had transferred to him. He didn't mind. After washing and drying his hands in the experimental area, he walked out to the farther beds and resumed illuminating the mushrooms. A week passed. After settling the matter with Malfoy, Shire could farm in peace again. Life settled into a productive routine. Every evening after classes, he spent long hours in the greenhouse, tending the luminous mushrooms. Now, a week later, the mycelia were better established. Small caps had begun to form, a sign they were entering the final stage before maturity. Shire allowed himself a small smile. "In a little over a week, these will mature," he said aloud. He checked his system panel. No new goldfish vines had matured that week, and the batch he'd sent to Hannah and Neville hadn't finished either. So his magic perception enhancement was still just shy of bronze. Other improvements, however, were more obvious. The pruning charm's bronze glow was already being tinged with silver. It needed only a little more to flip to a full silver radiance, another silver-level charm. Lumos itself was nearly bronze. Shire felt confident it would reach bronze in a day or two. If the luminous mushrooms matured soon and he harvested the Lumos perception rewards, Lumos might even become his third silver charm. The possibilities pleased him. He calmed his mind and bent back to his work. Then he noticed a faint blotch of red among the pale mycelia, hardly noticeable in the whole field. He muttered, leaning closer. A small patch of mycelium had turned a dark red. It was tiny and easily missed. He only found it because he was being thorough. Above the patch, a line of system text appeared. "The luminous mushrooms you cultivated have undergone an unknown mutation." 32. Another silver-level reward, critical point. "The luminous mushroom you cultivated has undergone an unknown mutation." When Charles read that line, his expression tightened. He had encountered plant trait mutations in both his past life and his present one. But it wasn't like most people imagined. Mutations didn't automatically make a plant more powerful. Most cultivable species were already excellent. Mutations usually degraded traits rather than improving them. So when he saw the luminous mushroom mutate in an unknown way, he grew immediately serious. He needed to find the cause. If it had happened randomly during proliferation, it was nothing to worry about. If it was triggered by an external factor, he had to find it fast. Otherwise, every luminous mushroom in the experimental field might mutate the same way. Charles inspected the field carefully. The soil shows no obvious changes. The water source is the same. The duration of Lumos exposure has been basically consistent. I haven't had any strong emotional fluctuations. After eliminating possible causes one by one, he returned to the area around the reddish mycelium. None of the other luminous mushroom mycelia show this. Then he thought of something. A week ago, after washing the blood from his hands, he must have dripped a few drops nearby. Could it be related to blood? Could blood cause this mutation? He wondered. Professor Sprout hadn't mentioned anything about that. There was very little research on luminous mushrooms in the magical world. Apart from illumination, they had little value for potions, so herbology masters focused on other herbs. After a moment's hesitation, Charles decided to test it. He picked up a sickle and slit his palm. The blade resisted at first, then finally cut his skin. Fresh blood welled out, and he let some fall onto the mutated mycelium and the ground around it. The nearby unmated luminous mushrooms didn't react. The soil simply absorbed the drops. Charles frowned. Was he wrong? Then he looked back at the reddish mutated mycelium. The blood on it was absorbed at an astonishing rate. The mycelia thickened visibly, their bright red color spreading outward. In moments, they no longer resembled ordinary luminous mushroom mycelia. They looked like a brand new magical plant. Charles breathed out softly. This mutation is indeed related to blood. But blood might only be an inducing factor, he told himself. It doesn't mean every luminous mushroom will mutate. There could be other conditions, or it could be chance. Still, he realized he had inadvertently cultivated the first mutated plant species in the magical world. He regarded the translucent, vivid red mycelium. Since it's related to blood and has that translucent, gem-like sheen, we'll call it blood emerald. A line of system text appeared above the mycelium. You have named the unknown mutated species of luminous mushroom, blood emerald. You have successfully cultivated blood emerald and can receive a reward, unknown, bronze level, incubating. After the blood emerald matures, the reward will be upgraded to unknown, silver level, unknown, black iron level. Charles froze. Mature luminous mushrooms usually provided black iron level rewards, but this mutation could upgrade the reward to silver level and possibly black iron level after full maturity? In richness of reward, blood emerald already rivaled the guardian tree. His mind raced. Blood seemed to promote blood emerald growth. Because his life force enhancement was legendary, the life force in his blood far exceeded that of ordinary people. Maybe his blood could accelerate its maturation. He reopened the shallow wound that had already begun to heal and let more fresh blood drip onto the mycelium. The blood emerald absorbed it hungrily. Its mycelium swelled and thickened. But almost at once, Charles' excitement waned. The plant reached a limit in absorption and stopped taking more. Its mycelia had thickened to a degree that, for ordinary luminous mushrooms, would indicate imminent formation of caps and final maturation. But the blood emerald showed no sign of forming caps. The reward indicator above it stagnated. Charles sighed inwardly. A plant that could grant rewards on par with the guardian tree wouldn't be easy to cultivate. Once luminous mushroom had mutated into blood emerald, its cultivation difficulty had apparently increased significantly. He would need specific conditions to mature it, and with no prior research, figuring that out alone would be extremely hard. He decided to find Professor Sprout. Professor Sprout listened as Charles explained the blood emerald. She frowned and examined him closely. Only after confirming he had not been affected by dark arts power and was not cursed did she finally breathe out with relief. Charles, she said seriously, many plants that require blood tend to produce dark arts manifestations. When you found this mutation, you shouldn't have continued to drip blood. You should have called me immediately. You're lucky this one isn't cursed. If you'd been harmed, what would I do? You're the only family I have left. Charles nodded quickly. Auntie, I won't do it again. Professor Sprout turned to the blood emerald. Her eyes widened. It truly was a magical plant she had never seen before. Amazing, she murmured. Luminous mushrooms can mutate into something like this. Astonishing. This blood emerald radiates strong magic. I think it could be used to brew very effective healing potions, but it looks like it still needs specific conditions to mature. Charles admired her all the more. Auntie, you're amazing, he said sincerely. Professor Sprout smiled. Leave it to me. I'll figure out its characteristics and cultivation method as soon as possible. She paused, then added with a grin. Once this is researched, it should make for a top herbology paper. I'll be corresponding author, and Charles, you'll be first author. A top journal first author at 11 years old. That's an incredible academic achievement. She laughed. Adding 50 points to the House Cup wouldn't be too much. Then her smile faded into a thoughtful sigh. Well, 50 points probably still won't be enough. It's only been a short time since term started, and our lead is already being caught. Severus, when it comes to the House Cup, he stops at nothing. He's been like this in previous years, but it's worse this year. We can't do those things. As for Gryffindor, she raised an eyebrow, knowing perfectly well. By the time the House Cup was decided, even if Gryffindor fell behind in points, there would always be 1,000 reasons for them to be awarded points. After all, Dumbledore could set up a special challenge to train the savior Harry Potter if he chose to. Professor Sprout had helped design some of those challenges. She understood Dumbledore's inclinations. Forget it. It's already good that Hufflepuff has led for 2 weeks. Charles' heart stirred at her words. He spoke earnestly. Tomorrow there's charms. Professor Flitwick said there'll be a small Lumos quiz, and first place will get 10 points. If I come first in the final Lumos test in 2 weeks, besides Professor Flitwick's own reward, there's 25 points. There are also points from Quidditch. This year, Hufflepuff might actually have a chance. Professor Sprout's smile softened. The House Cup is going to be tough this year. We probably won't take it. But Charles, I'm so glad you have this determination. We'll do our best. If we can't get first, second, or third is still something to be proud of. It's better than being last all these years. She left the greenhouse, but paused at the doorway and looked back at the plot where Charles' Lumos still flashed. She couldn't help worrying. Charles' effort was extraordinary. Professor Sprout had taught for many years and had never seen a wizard as diligent as Charles. But she had to admit that talent mattered. Charms was Professor Flitwick's domain, and Ravenclaw students were usually strong in that subject. She worried Charles might be disheartened if Ravenclaw swept the Lumos test. Determination tightened in her chest. I need to speed up my search for the ingredients for the talent-enhancing potion, she told herself. Back inside the greenhouse, Charles didn't notice her concern. He kept casting little Lumos spells over the luminous mushroom plot, watching the system panel. The bronze-level glow on the word Lumos intensified steadily until it reached a critical point. 33. Hope, bronze-level Lumos. A night passed. Charles stared at the system panel and gave a small shake of his head. Lumos is always stuck on the borderline between black iron and bronze level, he muttered. There had been progress compared to before, but it still hadn't crossed into bronze. It seemed his magical talent really couldn't rely on sudden enlightenment or battlefield breakthroughs. The chance of that happening was slim. Still, Charles felt no irritation. Lumos had been on the verge of advancing for only a couple of days. It was a matter of time and steady practice. There was no need to rush. Even without a promotion, his current command of Lumos was already far ahead of most young wizards. Lumos wasn't a spell that required prodigious innate talent. Persistent practice mattered far more, and Charles had every intention of putting in the hours. Winning a good rank on the upcoming Lumos quiz would not be difficult. The final test that would decide the exclusive charm was still 2 weeks away. By then, his Lumos would surely reach bronze level. The luminous mushrooms rewards and the goldfish vine plants that would mature in succession would push it over the edge. Charles had little doubt that no other student in his year would have better mastery of Lumos by then. A short while later, he left the greenhouse and entered the charms classroom. He was surprised by what he saw. He hadn't come particularly late, but where there would normally be only a few sleepy students, the room was packed. Almost every Hufflepuff, a house known for being a little forgetful, was present, diligently practicing Lumos. Even the Ravenclaws, who usually looked relaxed in their intelligence, had arrived early and were sweating from long practice. Clearly, they'd been working for a while. Charles understood why. Charms was Ravenclaw's ace subject. It would be humiliating for them to fall behind. He'd also heard about Wednesday's charms class in Gryffindor. Hermione Granger had displayed astonishing mastery of Lumos. Professor Flitwick had praised her repeatedly, hinting, rather regretfully, that such talent seemed wasted outside Ravenclaw. The Ravenclaws had been stung by that, and their practice had doubled over the past few days. Their progress showed. While there was still a notable gap between them and Charles, they had pulled clear ahead of the Hufflepuffs. When Professor Flitwick arrived and called the class to order, students came forward to demonstrate Lumos in alphabetical order. The Ravenclaws generally outshone the Hufflepuffs, and Flitwick let out a relieved breath. Still, none of the displays matched Hermione's performance from Wednesday. He felt the old pang of regret again. Why hadn't such a bright witch been sorted into Ravenclaw? With only a few students left, Flitwick no longer expected any surprise. The top spot, whether on this quiz or in the final test, seemed assured for Hermione. The Hufflepuffs felt it too. Their 2-week lead in the House Cup, maintained through hard work, was being chipped away, and the prospect of losing that lead stung. Hufflepuffs were easygoing, but they didn't like watching something they'd earned slip away. Still, they wouldn't make excuses if their skills were inferior. One by one, the remaining Hufflepuffs came forward, but none performed at the level needed to earn the bonus points. Finally, only Cheryl remained. His housemates cheered him on with open warmth. "Cheryl, don't be nervous. Don't feel pressured. This is our fault for not practicing harder. We'll never blame you, no matter what. Hufflepuffs stick together. Go for it." Their encouragement wrapped around him like a blanket. Walking onto the stage, Cheryl felt a strange, steady warmth. He was no longer just a lone student. He belonged here. Hufflepuff's hard-won lead might still be in danger. He didn't want Professor Sprout to be disappointed, and he didn't want his housemates to blame themselves. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll take this bonus point." Then Cheryl paused. For the first time, he understood what had been missing from his Lumos. Intention. Lumos, after all, is a light in the dark. Seeing that light is comforting, not because of its brightness alone, but because it represents hope. He realized he had to cast the charm with a hopeful heart. At that realization, the system panel that had always shown Lumos teetering on the edge suddenly filled with a warm sheen. The indicator shifted, then flashed. Lumos. Cheryl's hesitation turned into motion. The Hufflepuff's applause swelled. Hannah Abbott, Susan Bones, and the others were clapping so hard their palms were red. Professor Flitwick, who knew how hard Cheryl had been working, he'd often passed the greenhouse in the early mornings and heard Cheryl practicing, felt a soft sigh. Talent could be cruel. No amount of effort could always equal genius. "I hope this child won't be too disheartened," he thought. At that moment, Cheryl's wand tip flared to life. He spoke the charm calmly and clearly. Lumos. The light at the end of his wand burned steady and true, bright, unwavering, the kind of light that could guide a ship to shore on a pitch-black night. It was small, but utterly certain. Professor Flitwick's eyes widened. He had expected skill, but what he saw now brought something else entirely. "This is..." Professor Flitwick had been half expecting Ciel to look discouraged, so he was genuinely surprised to see a steady, confident Lumos glowing at the tip of Ciel's wand. The light was clearly superior to that of the other students, on a level with the Lumos Hermione Granger had produced on Wednesday. He had thought such proficiency would be hard to see in a pop quiz. That Ciel, whose talent he had not particularly noticed before, would display this level of skill so soon moved him. It had been only 2 weeks since Ciel had learned Lumos. To perform like this so quickly was either rare talent or extraordinary diligence. It seemed Ciel's effort had been greater than he had assumed. Flitwick lingered in admiration until he suddenly realized he had not yet commented on Ciel's spell. The Hufflepuffs around Ciel tensed. Coming back to himself, Flitwick's face broke into delight as he addressed the class in his high, energetic voice. "Beautiful Lumos, Ciel, you have already grasped the essence of this charm. Remember, charms, indeed all magic, are tied to the will and the mood with which you cast. You must truly feel the intent behind a charm to release its power. That is the path to success in charms." He turned to the Hufflepuff table. Hufflepuff will be awarded 5 points. To reach that level takes extraordinary effort. The Hufflepuffs listened blankly for a heartbeat, then understood and erupted into cheers. 5 points might not sound like much, but in regular class awards it was significant. Earning that many at once was rare. Houses did not gain points so easily. "Professor, who got first place in the quiz?" someone asked. First place in the Lumos Pop Quiz earned 10 bonus points, and if Ciel had taken first, it would make Hufflepuff's lead this week virtually unassailable. Flitwick hesitated. Who had earned first, Hermione Granger or Ciel? The two students' Lumos were almost identical, but Hermione had taken the quiz on Wednesday and Ciel on Friday. It seemed unfair to favor one over the other. Flitwick admired Ciel's hard work and wanted to encourage it, but he also knew Hermione's abilities. After a moment, an idea crystallized. Why choose just one? The purpose of the test was to encourage the students, not to force a painful decision. Clearing his throat, he announced the results for everyone to hear. The rankings for the Lumos Pop Quiz are as follows. First place, Hermione Granger, Gryffindor, and Shia Sprout, Hufflepuff. They both demonstrated a rare mastery of Lumos for this stage and are tied for first place in this quiz. Their houses will each be awarded 10 points. Third place goes to Padma Patil, Ravenclaw. Ravenclaw will be awarded 5 points. The Hufflepuffs exploded in happiness. Between the earlier 5 points and the 10 for first place, they had gained 15 points from charms, a meaningful boost that widened the gap with the close pursuing Slytherins. The Ravenclaws were disappointed to have been beaten not only by Hermione, but by Shia as well, but after watching Shia's Lumos, they had no complaints. At least they had claimed third and 5 points, and the real final Lumos test was still 2 weeks away. Flitwick had promised a unique little charm for those who ranked, and even larger house points for the final test. 25 for first, 15 for second, and 10 for third. If any house swept the top 3 in 2 weeks, they could earn 50 points and turn the tide of the cup. That possibility fired up the Ravenclaws. The pop quiz outcome would only motivate them to aim for the top 3 next time. The dismissal bell rang. The Hufflepuffs left the classroom in high spirits. The Ravenclaws were calmer but determined. The Slytherins, however, arrived at the hourglasses pale and stunned. Earlier in potions, Snape had generously awarded them points for following the textbook during their practical. They had managed to gain 10 points. They had hoped that would put them ahead of Hufflepuff. Instead, the hourglasses showed the gap had widened. Hufflepuff had taken 15 points in charms. The Slytherins' faces fell further when the details of the charms class spread. Gryffindor and Hufflepuff had tied for first, a Ravenclaw took third, and Slytherin had nothing. Before they could recover, a tall, sallow figure cut through the corridor and stopped in front of them. The students shrank back. "Professor Severus," someone whispered. Snape's expression was as dark as a soot-stained cauldron. He had bent over backward to give them points, and still they fell behind. He ground his teeth. "You are the worst Slytherin class I have ever taught. Now go back to your common room." They shuffled away like under a cloud, barely daring to breathe. Snape's voice followed them, cold and unyielding. "In the charms test 2 weeks from now, you must take the top 3 spots." The students paled. "Professor? That's going to be difficult." Snape's contempt flared. "Difficult? You call Lumos difficult? Merlin, Slytherin is getting worse every year. When I was a first year, I could already handle spells meant for 7th years. How did you lot manage to fall so far?" After a long, controlled exhale, he snapped, "From now on, you will have no extracurriculars. Use every free moment to practice Lumos. As for the test in 2 weeks, I will give you a little help. I will prepare a potion that can temporarily enhance the power of your Lumos." The Slytherins, at least, relaxed a little at that promise. A potion brewed by their potions master was something tangible, a likely boost. Meanwhile, after class, Shia went back to the greenhouse with a light of anticipation in their eyes. What effect would the promotion of their Lumos to bronze level have on cultivating the luminous mushroom? How much faster would the mushrooms ripen? Shia took a breath, raised the wand, and cast Lumos. A bright, steady light washed over the luminous mushroom beds. The mycelium that the light touched began, almost imperceptibly at first, to stir and shift. 35. Miraculous effect. Magical perception transformation. Shire's Lumos had just been promoted to bronze level. As its light spread across the field, the luminous mushroom mycelium reacted immediately. They seemed to brighten with joy, as if a gourmand had been presented with a delicacy. Having tended them for some time, Shire knew their usual growth rate well. Now he could confirm it had increased by at least 20%. That alone was huge. Luminous mushrooms in the Hogwarts greenhouse already had nearly optimal growing conditions, so a 20% boost was significant. But Shire's surprise didn't end there. Under the bronze Lumos, some mycelium that hadn't yet formed caps suddenly began to show signs of cap development. Shire's eyes lit up. Forming caps was a crucial step in the mushroom's maturation. Previously, the best-growing specimens still took 2 or 3 days to form caps at this stage. Bronze Lumos seemed to catalyze that process. If his calculations were right, his batch could mature at least 5 days earlier. And that was only with bronze Lumos. A silver or higher level Lumos would likely have an even greater effect. Excitement surged through him. Epic or legendary Lumos didn't seem so far off now. Mythical level, one step beyond legendary in the system, felt like a distant dream, but this gave him a glimpse of possibility. Still, he pulled himself back from daydreaming. He had to be practical. Instead of musing, he continued his routine, carefully sweeping Lumos light over every corner of the mushroom beds. He only stopped when the mycelium began to glow faintly, the sign they had absorbed enough for the day. By then, the sky was lightening. Normally, he'd need to prepare for classes, but it was the weekend and he had time. If the mushrooms didn't need more Lumos for now, what next? He looked at his wand. After a full night of practice, bronze Lumos had a barely perceptible deeper bronze sheen. 2 more days of practice might yield further progress. But he remembered how Lumos had accelerated cap formation and wondered whether bronze Lumos might have similar effects on other magical plants that preferred light. The goldfish vine he'd planted came to mind. It also responded to Lumos. Though rare talents like Neville and Hannah were exceptional, many Hufflepuff's goldfish vines were already close to maturity, some only a few leaves away from turning entirely orange-red. The final stage was always the slowest. A single leaf could take a whole day to finish reddening. If bronze Lumos could push them over the edge, he might harvest a few more pots in 2 days. His heart picked up. He headed back to the Hufflepuff dormitory. His roommates were still asleep. Only one blinked groggily as Shire returned. "Morning, Shire," the boy mumbled. "Is the breakfast ready in the kitchen?" Shire asked with a smile. "It's still early. You don't have classes these 2 days, so sleep in," the roommate replied. Shire held up the breakfast he'd packed from the Hufflepuff kitchens. "I brought breakfast." The word breakfast jolted the dormitory awake. One by one, his roommates sat bolt upright. Someone dashed out of bed, barefoot and still half asleep, following the scent to the food without even opening his eyes. The others followed, and in moments the meal was devoured. Afterwards, they all fell back into bed with happy expressions, asleep again in an instant. Shire watched them with a small affectionate smile and a quiet sigh. Hufflepuff life suited them, but for him, planting gave him more satisfaction. He set his potted goldfish vines out in the common room so he wouldn't disturb anyone and examined them. Most leaves were already orange-red, only a few stubborn green patches remained. He waved his wand gently. Lumos. Light spilled from the wand. The sluggish reddening process suddenly accelerated as if the leaves had been given a nutrient. Orange spread from the edges inward at a speed many times faster than before. Shire kept the Lumos steady, eyes fixed on the leaves. 2 hours later, the last traces of green vanished from the 3 pots. You have successfully cultivated 3 goldfish vines. You can receive rewards, magic perception enhancement, iron level Bex 3. 3 luminous reward orbs floated before him. Shire didn't hesitate. After 2 previous harvests, his magic perception enhancement was already close to bronze level. This might finally complete its transformation. He reached out and touched the spheres. The instant they merged into him, a powerful sensation surged through his bloodstream, sharp, thrilling, and wholly new. 36. Cultivate again. News of blood jade. When the 3 reward orbs poured in, the small, steady gains from earlier rewards finally reached a tipping point. Chard had never felt anything like it, magic running through his veins like a winding stream. With every thought, his magic shifted, subtle and responsive. It was as if once a thought grew strong enough, or he wrapped his hand around his wand and spoke, the magic answered instantly and produced effects that would have seemed impossible in the mundane world. The sensation lasted over 10 seconds before fading, and when it did, Chard felt a faint sense of loss. His attention snapped to the system panel. The indicator for magic perception enhancement was no longer dim. It shone bronze. Bronze-level magic perception enhancement. Chard inhaled sharply. It had taken him so long to bring Lumos up to bronze, and yet magic perception had leapt forward in just a few rewards. The planting system really was powerful. A strange light came into his eyes. With the planting system, his low natural magical talent need no longer be a dead end. The improvement was gradual, but by planting Margaret and Goldfish Vine over time, his raw power and perception could climb to heights few wizards reached. After all, magical talent has 2 main measures: magical power and magic perception. Power determines the raw force behind a spell. Two wizards casting the same charm will not necessarily achieve the same result if one has greater power. That advantage also makes learning high-level spells easier. In the original stories, Harry, despite less theoretical knowledge than Hermione, eventually surpassed her in raw power, an example of how strength matters. Magic perception, by contrast, matters more in fields like alchemy, potions, and herbology. A strong perceiver senses a plant's subtle life, reads the flow of reactions in a potion, and knows when to intervene. That's how Snape, even as a schoolboy, could overturn textbook potion methods, genius flashes of insight that ordinary perceivers might only reach after decades. Right now, with bronze-level perception, Chard had a taste of that genius feeling. Still, bronze was modest. Among Hogwarts' students this year, he'd likely be near the bottom. But it was an upgrade, going from a matchlock to a flintlock. He lazily cast Lumos and smiled at how smooth and clear the magic felt. If his perception had been this sharp earlier, Lumos would have advanced much faster. That thought led naturally to the Guardian Tree. If his perception had changed so much, could he try cultivating the tree again? Thinking of the generous rewards it might offer, Chard hurried back to the greenhouse. He took out the set of materials Professor Sprout had left him, calmed his mind until his mood was steady and wouldn't disturb the seed, and then carefully withdrew the Guardian Tree seed. He tapped his wand and filled his thoughts with happy, joyful images. Last time, he hadn't been sure whether that technique even affected the magic. This time, he could feel it. The magic he sent felt lighter, more vibrant. The seed's own vitality stirred in response. Chard's eyes widened. Magic perception made a huge difference in herbology. He soaked the seed in the potion bottle and tried to read the magic, but the potion's currents tangled with the seed's own. It was too complex for him to untangle precisely, so after a moment, he stopped trying to differentiate every thread. Following a vague sense instead, he tapped the bottle 3 times with his wand, traced 3 concentric circles clockwise in the air, and intoned Protego, Arboris. The seed quivered violently. The once clear potion in the vial flashed green, spreading until it was the color of a blood emerald. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Then, after 10 seconds, the brilliant green faded and the seed fell quiet. Chard shook his head. Failed again, he said aloud, but he did not sound defeated. This time felt different. The process had gone further. He had seen the way to success. The seed treatment step will need at least silver-level magic perception, he told himself. To carry it all the way to a full-grown guardian tree and have a good chance at success will probably require gold-level perception. He was only bronze now, far from gold, but he wasn't worried. By the end of this school year, I should have a decent shot, he thought. Take it slow. Just then, Professor Sprout entered the greenhouse, carrying a petri dish. Inside, the specimen glowed faintly, the luminous mushroom variant Chard had discovered, the blood emerald. Chard, Professor Sprout said, voice bright, about that mushroom you called blood emerald. I've mostly worked out its properties. Chard's face lit up. That fast? Sprout was true to her reputation. Giving her the specimen had been the right choice. If he'd tried to analyze it himself, he might have killed the rare strain. He turned expectantly to the professor. Professor Sprout's expression froze instead. Her gaze had gone to the potion bottle in Chard's hand, the one with the guardian tree seed. This, she began. Chard, did you do this? 37. Reward, 5x fantastic beasts. Professor Sprout stared at the vial in Ciel's hand, surprise lighting her face. With her experience as a herbology master, she could tell at a glance. Ciel had made huge progress cultivating guardian tree seeds this time. Even so, his performance still couldn't match those prodigies with exceptional magical perception. What made it remarkable was the speed, such improvement in just over 2 weeks. Sprout's eyes shone with pleasure. My Ciel really does have potential to be a herbology master. Even with such poor innate magical talent, he's made amazing gains. If I could help him improve his magic talent, the thought made her inwardly excited. I've already found traces of materials for a talent-enhancing potion, she murmured. Moonpetal flower, carrion vulture, geranium luo. I'll gather those as quickly as I can, Ciel. After praising him, Sprout shifted her attention back to the blood emerald she held up. Ciel looked on, curious. He didn't know the properties of the blood emerald, so the reward information for it was unknown to him, just as it had been when he first planted the Margaret. Professor Sprout began to explain, and as she spoke, the mystery of the blood emerald slowly unfolded. The blood emerald is a magical herb mutated from the luminous mushroom, she said. It has astonishing hemostatic and blood regenerative properties. You've already learned about dittany in herbalism. Dittany is a rare and powerful hemostatic. The dittany essence is so potent that a few drops can make external wounds heal at amazing speed. But dittany does little for internal bleeding. From my tests, if the blood emerald is used in a potion with certain ingredients, it could produce an internal bleeding treatment comparable to dittany essence. Also, this herb greatly enhances blood production, replenishing blood in a short time, which is invaluable for severely injured patients or those with weak constitutions. As she spoke, the reward information for the blood emerald appeared before Ciel's eyes. You have successfully planted blood emerald and can obtain a reward, slight increase in blood production ability, bronze level, incubating. After the blood emerald matures, the reward will be upgraded to slight increase in blood production ability, silver level, unknown reward, black iron level. Ciel felt a stir. So the silver level reward was an increase in blood production. That would help strengthen the body and speed recovery. Useful, but it overlapped somewhat with the legendary level vitality enhancement he already possessed. Unless the reward could be stacked very high, the effect might not be dramatic. Then a new thought struck him. He had once tried to stack his legendary vitality enhancement to mythical level, reasoning that mythical vitality might even extend life, possibly grant immortality. But that attempt had stalled for a year with no progress. He had almost given up. Now, seeing that the blood emerald could boost blood production, a new plan bloomed in his mind. What if I stack blood production to legendary level, then combine it with legendary level vitality enhancement? Could quantitative accumulation trigger a qualitative leap? Or might multiple complementary abilities need to reach legendary level before advancement to mythical is possible? A gleam of hope lit Ciel's eyes. It was only a guess, but after so many dead ends, this seemed the most promising direction. Mythical level abilities would be a profound change. He had to try, if there was even a chance. He then looked at the black iron level unknown reward and asked Sprout the crucial question. Ant, are those all the properties of the blood emerald so far? Any less obvious effects? Sprout smiled, a little surprised and very pleased. Ciel, your sense for herbalism is sharp. I wasn't going to say anything because I wasn't sure, but since you sensed it, I'll tell you my guess. She took a breath. I suspect this herb might have a slight positive effect on the bloodlines of magical creatures and even wizards. It's extremely weak, almost negligible, and would require a lot of research to confirm. Right now, it's only a personal conjecture. As she spoke, the unknown reward cleared into view. After the blood emerald matures, a reward can be obtained. Extremely slight bloodline purification, black iron level. Ciel clenched his fists. That was excellent. A wizard's magical ability stems from their bloodline. If the bloodline could be purified, even slightly, it might improve magical talent. If he could stack improvements in magical perception and magical strength, his talent could reach unprecedented levels. The blood emerald suddenly felt more important than the guardian tree. So, Ant, Ciel asked, what triggers the mutation from luminous mushroom to blood emerald? How does it mature? Sprout's smile faded into a wry expression. There's the rub. It's valuable, but the cultivation is costly and difficult. To induce a luminous mushroom to mutate into a blood emerald, you need blood with magic as a catalyst. The stronger the magic in the blood, the higher the chance. I tried using my own blood, about a 1 in 1,000 chance of inducing the mutation. Once it's mutated, the plant's demand for blood drops during the growth period. You can get by with weaker magical blood, so long as the vitality is strong. But at the crucial transition from growth to maturity, it needs much more powerful magical blood for catalysis. My blood can't meet that requirement. Among wizards, only a very few could induce a blood emerald to mature. It's far better to use the blood of powerful magical creatures. But it must be fresh. Blood that's been left too long won't work. I tried dragon blood sold in Diagon Alley, but it was too old. Fresh dragon blood collected within 2 hours is best. or blood from other powerful magical creatures, as long as it's strong and fresh. Xiao's face fell. Of course, a plant whose reward could rival a guardian tree wouldn't be easy to cultivate. According to Sprout, he'd need access to 5x level magical creatures comparable to dragons to draw fresh blood at the right times. What counted as 5x level beasts? Dragons, basilisks, venomous pouch leopards, acromantulas, creatures that could easily kill an adult wizard. Getting one to bleed for a plant? Even Sprout probably couldn't manage it. Ciel might be able to handle their young at best, but young of 5x level beasts are incredibly valuable and tightly controlled by the Ministry of Magic, fetching astronomical prices on the black market. Where would he find them? He shook his head, resolving to set the matter aside for now. Then, like a flash of lightning, an idea struck him. 5x level magical creature young, he muttered inwardly. There might be a way. 38. Norwegian Ridgeback, Midnight Duel. Xiao Sprout remembered a detail from the original story, Hagrid's obsession with raising dragons. The two-faced man, who had long been blocked by Cerberus, had somehow managed to obtain a dragon egg. Only then could he pry from Hagrid the way to deal with Cerberus. Hagrid raised the egg carefully, and a Norwegian Ridgeback named Norbert hatched. But Norbert grew so quickly that Hagrid, with a heavy heart, gave him to Charlie Weasley, who sent the dragon to a sanctuary in Romania. Knowing this didn't mean Xiao Sprout could guarantee success in getting Norbert's blood to cultivate a blood emerald, but it was a far easier prospect than trying to capture a fully grown dragon. Blood emeralds offered Xiao Sprout many benefits. If possible, he didn't want to give one up. Still, he forced himself to be calm. In the original timeline, there was a long way to go before Hagrid even obtained the egg, let alone hatched a young dragon. Obsessing over that now would be fruitless. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. What mattered was cultivating the herbology skills and resources he already had. Otherwise, he might miss the immediate opportunities and fail to grow anything at all, let alone a blood emerald. So Xiao Sprout returned to his work in the greenhouses. Although the luminous mushroom had absorbed more than enough lumos light that day, the soil loosening spell and the pruning charm still had to be done every day. Loosening the soil improved aeration and let the mycelium breathe. Pruning away abnormal growth saved nutrients for the healthy mycelium. These small, tedious tasks accumulated into real improvements over time. Sometimes the difference between excellent and perfect was only in such details. Xiao Sprout applied the soil loosening spell and pruning charm with meticulous care. Professor Sprout watched him, her expression growing more and more approving. As a master of herbology, she understood how rare that kind of quality work was. Not wanting to disturb him further, she quietly left the greenhouse. On her way out, she passed the huge hourglass in the castle that recorded house cup points. Her mood brightened even more. Hufflepuff was still leading the house cup. Merlin, she hadn't seen that sight in years. At that moment, a figure in a black cloak, with greasy hair and a face like a bat's, passed the hourglass as well. Severus Snape caught sight of Professor Sprout's triumphant look, bristled, gave a stiff nod, and hurried off down a fork in the corridor. Professor Sprout didn't notice his sourness. She hummed a little tune and left with a smile. Listening to her humming behind him, Snape seethed. He had helped Slytherin win the House Cup 7 years running before this. When had he ever felt so slighted? This year's Slytherin had terribly disappointed him. Snape headed to his office. He still had to brew a troublesome, time-consuming potion for the first year's Lumos test. "I hope," he muttered, "that while I'm brewing this potion, those idiots have been practicing Lumos like I told them, and not doing anything stupid." Down in the Slytherin common room, the first-year little snakes were groaning. They'd been practicing charms for hours on end. It was mind-numbing, and their arms ached. Malfoy's face was pale. The scabs from the giant devil's snare on his body had only just healed, and every drop of sweat made the itching and pain return. The image of himself drenched in that sticky sap flashed into his mind. He shivered and shook his head to clear it, and then his expression hardened. He stopped practicing and called the others to a halt. "This is stupid," he snapped. "How long are we going to keep doing this? 2 days? 2 weeks of our free time? If we want the House Cup lead, we should be smarter." Most of the little snakes liked Malfoy's idea instantly. Slytherins were used to ease and shortcuts. They preferred cleverness to toil. A few were curious and asked, "What smart way?" "Don't try to get points ourselves," Malfoy said, a smugness in his voice. "Make our rivals lose points instead. It's the same effect." The others exchanged approving looks. It made sense. "So what's the plan?" someone asked. Malfoy grinned. "It's simple. Send a challenge letter to those who threaten us. Invite them to duel at a certain place at midnight. Then quietly tell Filch about it and have him catch them. That'll cost their houses a lot of points." He named targets. Harry Potter, who'd surely bring Ron Weasley, and Ciel Sprout, the Hufflepuff's proud little hero. If they're caught, they'll lose double the points. Hufflepuff's unity could get them all nabbed and stripped of points. Thinking of how Professor Sprout had glowed over the hourglass earlier made Malfoy's satisfaction grow. He imagined getting payback for the humiliation he'd suffered. The little snakes found the plan perfectly Slytherin. A few, more cautious, raised doubts. What if they get the challenge but don't come? Especially Ciel Sprout. He seems to spend all his time planting. Will he really show? Malfoy scoffed. Write the right words and everybody will take the bait. Planting? Please. Who cares about planting when you can win a duel? He looked at them knowingly. At our age, who can refuse the glory of victory? Ciel Sprout won't stay away. Absolutely impossible. The Slytherins talked it over among themselves. Malfoy had a point, and none of them wanted to spend the next 2 weeks doing the same dull charms practice. If there was an easy way to keep from having to attend, why not take it? They soon hatched several dueling challenges and sent them out by owl. The thought of Harry Potter and Ciel foolishly heading to the agreed dueling ground that night and getting caught by Filch made the Slytherins smile wickedly. Malfoy even thought, in a darker moment, that having both expelled would be the ideal outcome. Meanwhile, Ciel was busy in the greenhouse when a bell near his plot began to chime. For a moment, he was startled, then remembered Professor Sprout's explanation. The little bells by the greenhouses ring when a student receives mail. Hufflepuffs often worked so long among the plants that they lost track of time. Once someone nearly missed a letter about his grandparents' deaths, so Sprout had installed those bells. The nearest bell rings when a student in the greenhouse gets mail and keeps ringing until the student says, "I know," getting louder if ignored so nothing important ever goes unseen. Ciel frowned. Aside from Professor Sprout, who would be sending him letters, Sprout saw him every day. There wasn't any reason for correspondence. He thought for a moment and realized a more likely possibility. Professor Sprout did say she ordered a Nimbus 2000 broom for me from the company, he murmured. If his broom had arrived, it would be a big deal. He hadn't meant to leave it unclaimed. He wouldn't want anything to happen to it, and it would be impolite not to collect a gift Sprout had chosen for him. So he left his work and headed back to the castle. As he walked toward the Hufflepuff common room, someone stepped into his path. Ciel, can we talk? He looked down to see Hermione Granger, bushy brown hair, slightly prominent front teeth, as surprised to see him as he was to see her. Since the sorting ceremony, they had had little chance to speak outside of class. Hermione spent most of her time in the library and Ciel in the greenhouse. He nodded. Of course. I'm just heading back to the common room. If you don't mind, shall we talk as we walk? Hermione's relief showed at once. Ciel noticed that her eyes were a little red, as if she had been crying. She also looked clouded with confusion. Hermione, what's the matter? It was as if a valve had opened. Hermione poured out everything she'd been holding in. I just don't understand. I work so hard to earn points for Gryffindor, and no one appreciates it. They act like I'm too much, like they really dislike me. Her voice trembled, and her eyes filled with fresh tears. She scrubbed at her face to stop herself from crying in front of him, and then began to explain what had happened that day. The Lumos final is in 2 weeks. We all know how many points that test can earn. I'm certain I can get top marks. If Gryffindor gets another placing, we'll be leading the House Cup. She stopped, then waved her hand at him. I don't mean to underestimate you, Ciel. That's all right, he said with a small smile. I have the confidence to come first in any test, she went on. So I asked everyone to spend the weekend doing extra practice. with me showing them the proper technique. Instead of sleeping in or playing wizard's chess or wandering the castle, wouldn't it be better if they practiced Lumos and earned points? She looked bewildered. But no one would listen, except Neville. I don't understand what they're thinking. Ciel felt equal parts amused and sympathetic. Children loved to play. Gryffindors, being the most lively and restless, were particularly unlikely to gather voluntarily for extra drills unless there was something official like a dueling club, or unless someone with Harry's standing led them. Hermione simply didn't have that pull. It would have been a thankless task. Then Ciel's face brightened. Maybe Hermione didn't need to recruit Gryffindors. Hufflepuffs would be eager. He knew how worried his housemates were about the Lumos final. Professor Sprout hadn't said anything, but the Hufflepuffs themselves felt embarrassed about their performance in the last quiz. If Ciel hadn't done so well, Hufflepuff wouldn't have placed at all. They didn't want all the pressure to rest on him alone. The kind of steady, late-blooming Hufflepuffs they were could improve given good guidance, and with Hermione's thoroughness at the helm, their practice would be far more efficient. They might even manage a top 3 finish. Hermione, Ciel said, Hufflepuff could really use you. If you'd teach them Lumos, they'd listen. Hermione hesitated. Her goal was to help Gryffindor win the House Cup. Would she be sabotaging that by training another house? Ciel anticipated her worry and shifted his pitch. Think of it as a visit, a way to relax and change your mood. Hufflepuff tea and snacks are some of the best in Hogwarts. Consider it a thank you for talking with me. At the promise of tea and an audience eager to learn, Hermione finally agreed. All right, she said. Ciel smiled inwardly. The plan had worked. If Hermione came to the Hufflepuff common room, she would find it hard to stop herself from instructing others. True to form, once she arrived, settled into a chair with a plate of cakes and a cup of tea, Hermione's self-control began to fray. She tried not to look at the Hufflepuffs practicing Lumos, telling herself to relax, but there were too many mistakes. 5 minutes later, when Hannah Abbott made the same small error for the 7th time, Hermione snapped. She drew her wand. Stop! That's not how you use Lumos. 40. Which serious little badger is walking at night? Pruning spell promotion. Even though your spell is Lumos, your syllables aren't stressed right. It's Lumos. When you turn, your wand has to finish the first circle. An exasperated Hermione corrected Hannah, then immediately regretted the sharpness in her tone. She hadn't been thinking about house rivalries, only about teaching technique and about how the other Gryffindors had reacted when she tried to help them. Maybe she shouldn't always point out people's mistakes. Hermione was a little annoyed at herself, but Hannah's face brightened into a surprised, almost delighted look. She bobbed her head like a small bird. Oh, is that how it's done? I knew something felt off about my Lumos, Hannah admitted. She waved her wand again as Hermione had shown her. It wasn't perfect by Hermione's standards, but it was clearly much better than before. Hannah glowed with joy and looked at Hermione with admiration. Hermione, you're brilliant! The Hufflepuffs nearby peered over eagerly. One by one, they edged closer, hesitant but hopeful. Hermione, could you teach me? I think my Lumos is wrong too. Sit down, quickly, everyone. Bring Hermione some snacks. Fruit tea. Someone brew hot fruit tea. Hermione found herself surrounded and momentarily bewildered. She had tried to teach the Gryffindors and been brushed off. She never expected to be eagerly sought out by Hufflepuff. After a brief hesitation, she asked, You're not uncomfortable with me pointing things out? The Hufflepuffs looked genuinely puzzled. But you're willing to teach us. What's wrong with that? We don't understand, so we should ask someone who does. Of course, we'll do whatever Hermione says. Why would we be uncomfortable? Hermione stared for a long time. She remembered the sorting conversations on the Hogwarts Express when she'd favored Ravenclaw or Gryffindor, sneered at Slytherin as evil, and dismissed Hufflepuff as mediocre. Now she felt a new understanding. Mediocre, maybe, but humble. How could that not be a kind of excellence? A wave of shame washed over her. She cleared her throat and regained her composure. All right, one at a time. I'll do my best to show you. Nearby, Sharp Sprout watched with a fond, slightly smug expression. Miss Know-It-All, indeed. Hermione's teaching was direct and precise. Every correction hit the heart of the matter. Even if she didn't become Minister of Magic as in some other story, she would make an excellent professor. With Hermione's guidance, the Hufflepuffs might surprise everyone when the Lumos exam came. Shia Sprout picked up a letter addressed to him. The envelope bore a stern line. Very important. Shia Sprout must open personally. He felt a prickle of unease. Who could have sent this? He slid it open. Inside, messy, disguised handwriting sprawled across the page. Shia Sprout, you poor wretch who grew up in the Muggle world, it began. 800 words omitted below. In short, if you've got the guts, come to the trophy room at midnight tonight for a duel. You may bring as many duel assistants as you like. Shia Sprout's face went through a few expressions. A duel challenge. He had a pretty good guess who had written it. Midnight duel and trophy room were a little too on the nose. It sounded exactly like the kind of trap Malfoy might lay. Only in the original, it had been proposed face to face. Now it came in the form of a letter. He hadn't expected one to be sent to him. He shoved the paper into the fireplace. Hermione noticed the action and asked, curious, "What was that? Why did you burn it?" Shia Sprout couldn't help a wry smile. Not a love letter. A challenge, he said. An anonymous duel challenge. Told me to go to the trophy room at midnight and to bring several assistants. Hermione's face went pale. A wizard's duel? With assistants? That kind can be deadly, she said. They fight until one party is dead and the assistants take over, until only one person is left alive or everyone's dead. Shia Sprout, are you thinking of going? She demanded. The Hufflepuffs, alert now at Hermione's raised voice, exchanged nervous looks. Shia Sprout, a duel? We could come with you. He said we could bring more assistants. Let's all go. Strength in numbers. Or should we tell Professor Sprout? Shia Sprout held up his hand to stop them. No, of course not. This is Malfoy's trap, he said. He's a coward. He won't really hold a duel. He'll get Filch or the caretaker involved and try to have me caught wandering at night. That would lose Hufflepuff points and let Slytherin pull ahead. He shook his head. No self-respecting Hufflepuff would go wandering at midnight to duel. Hearing that, everyone relaxed, but Hermione's expression changed. She had thought of something else. If he sent you a challenge, he might have sent others, to Gryffindor too. He could be trying to distract Gryffindor so Slytherin stays ahead. That worried her. The Hufflepuffs weren't interested in night prowling or duels, but Gryffindors might be tempted. No matter who received the letter, some of them would be tempted to go. Hermione stood up and hurried toward the Gryffindor common room. Shia Sprout watched her go, curious about how the midnight duel incident would unfold this time. Would it play out differently from the original story? After a moment, he shook his head. Probably not. The Golden Trio hadn't properly formed yet. Their bonds weren't the unbreakable thing forged through shared hardship that Hermione might rely on in other stories. She was still something of an outsider in Gryffindor. Who would listen to her? The thought passed through his mind, then Shia Sprout dismissed it. These things didn't concern him much. He had gardening to think about, luminous mushrooms and goldfish vines to tend, and most of the work was already done. He was mostly waiting for plants to mature. His eye fell on the system panel. The pruning charm was already surrounded by a rich silver glow. The bronze indicator was nearly invisible. It was almost at silver. The soil loosening spell surprised me when it hit silver, he said to himself. I wonder what a silver-level pruning charm will change. His anticipation showed in his eyes. He waved his wand over the pots of goldfish vine in the common room. Arbor siccus, deadwood snapped away. Several poorly growing leaves withered and fell, instantly converting into nutrients for the healthier leaves. On the system panel, the silver sheen around the pruning charm brightened noticeably, shivering up a few points.